Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we are getting into the main chunks of Chapter 8, Section 4, talking about Roosevelt and his square deal. Let's take a look at our learning targets. We will discuss Roosevelt's ideas on the role of government and his square deal. We'll analyze how Roosevelt changed the government's role in the economy. We'll talk about how Roosevelt decided to protect and preserve natural resources, and we will compare his predecessor's policies with Roosevelt's and discuss their showdown, if you will, in the election of 1912. Roosevelt he's a Rough Rider, and what that is during the Spanish-American War, which we'll talk about in Chapter 9, he was in a voluntary cavalry unit in Cuba that just destroyed everyone. They rode over everything. They're very tough men. He has been the governor of New York, and he pushed for progressive reforms at the state level. And this really annoys Republican leaders, so they convinced President McKinley to make him vice president in the election of 1900. And that way they'll get him out of New York. But then their worst fear comes true, and McKinley is assassinated, and Roosevelt becomes president in 1901. Roosevelt becomes president and decides to put forth his square deal, which there's three basic ideas of the square deal. We're going to focus on the conservation of natural resources, the control of corporations, and consumer protection. And this aims at mostly helping the burgeoning middle class in America. So his idea is that corporations shouldn't have an unfair advantage. So he is also hard on corporations, but he also protected corporations from the threats of organized labor. He didn't think that organized labor should have any higher advantage than corporations did. He passes the Hepburn Act, which basically gives the ICC some teeth to oversee the railroad industry, and it also helped set and limit shipping costs for railroads, ferries, bridge tolls, and oil pipelines going interstate. His idea was he was going to be a trust buster, and a trust buster, he would bust the bad trusts and leave the good ones alone, ones that drove prices down. And so that's Roosevelt's thoughts on corporations. As far as consumer protections, we've talked about the novelist Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle. He passes, in response to The Jungle, two things: the Meat Inspection Act, which gives the Department of Agriculture, which is a federal agency, they inspect meat and processing plants and make sure that they are up to snuff, and the Pure Food and Drug Act, which makes way for the modern-day FDA, which gives us laws for other foods, labeling, and impure foods, and basically making it law that they have to do certain things in order to keep sanitation and keep people from getting sick. Roosevelt also decides that we must conserve natural resources. He's an outdoorsman. He loves to hunt, but he knows that if we keep taking away natural resources at the rate that we do, we're not going to have it anymore, and he thought it was worth protecting. So he sets aside over 100 million acres of wildlands and forests for parks and lumber usage, and he makes way for the modern-day national parks system, which follows in his honor. He also passes the National Reclamation Act because so many people are moving to the Southwest and Los Angeles that it's really putting some heavy toll on their water usage. And so what the National Reclamation Act says that the federal government is going to control all the water in the Southwest and build dams and aqueducts to divert water to the places that need it most. And that's going to be the responsibility of the federal government. After 2 terms, it really hurt Roosevelt to leave the White House, but he does. He wanted to run for a 3rd term, but he promised after his re-election in 1904 that that would be his last one. And so William Howard Taft is the person who Roosevelt handpicks to replace him, but since he handpicked him, the people vote for him. Roosevelt expected his policies to remain in place, but Taft sets his own agenda. And basically his agenda was he did not distinguish between good trusts and bad trusts, and Roosevelt is furious. So William Howard Taft is president, elected in 1908, serves through 1913, and in the election of 1912, this splits the Republican Party. So a lot of the Republicans vote for Roosevelt, and not that many Republicans vote for Taft. But the issue splitting them apart splits the Republican. Roosevelt and his progressives actually leave the Republican Party and start their own party called the Progressive Bull Moose Party. And in the election of 1912, since Taft and Roosevelt split the Republican vote, Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, becomes president. And he's also a progressive, and he's going to lead the country through World War I. So let's review. We talked about Roosevelt's ideas on government and the role of government in society. We saw how Roosevelt changed the government's role in the economy, his actions on natural resources, and his policies with Taft. And I hope you learned something today on Roosevelt. We're going to be watching some more stuff on Roosevelt in class to kind of flesh out the ideas presented here. So I'll see you then. Have a good night.